All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar, dealing with fatigue and sleep disorders. Most accidents for all cars on the road are due to driver error, and a big reason for that comes often from driver fatigue. All drivers deal with fatigue, and back when they were talking about the sleep apnea regulation bill that they were trying to push through back in 2017, they came out with a number saying about 28% of commercial truck drivers likely suffer from mild to severe sleep apnea, and that these drivers are 5 times more likely to be involved in a crash. This webinar will cover fatigue, understanding sleep and sleep cycles, diving into sleep disorders, and leave you with strategies for how to better handle sleep while on the road. The speaker today is, as always, our great John Sallak. He's a retired safety consultant and trainer who has worked for 20 years with the Oregon Trucking Association and is a well-known voice in trucking issues here in Oregon. Before we begin, I do have a couple housekeeping items. This webinar is scheduled for an hour. It might not take that whole time. The phones will be muted during the webinar, so if you have any questions, please submit your questions in the chat box. I, Luke Kibbe, will be your moderator today, and we'll keep an eye on the questions. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session to answer those questions. If we do run long, we will email any of those questions out after the webinar. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and as always, you will receive the presentation and the link of the recording after the webinar. If I don't have it to you by the end of the day today, expect it tomorrow or in the next couple of days coming. But I should try to get it out to you by the end of the day today. With that, we're going to go ahead and dive on in. We're going to welcome John. Let me click on, here we go. We welcome John, and John, you can take it away.
All right, thank you, Luke. As Luke told you, we've got an issue in our industry, in the trucking industry, with fatigue. And if you look at what we expect from a truck driver with the schedules, the appointments, the demands, the crazy hours, working at night, working during the day, then a little bit of both, and then the stress that comes just with life in our society today. Issues at home, with finances, with family, with health issues. And then the stress of trying to do a good job and get our freight delivered. So there's an awful lot going on, and they can all add to fatigue. And fatigue can lead us to, at times, not being as prepared as we should be to drive a commercial vehicle safely. So what we'd like to do is talk about that a little bit today. Excuse me. So what is fatigue? It's the body's response to continued physical or mental activity or sleep loss, and it's characterized by diminished ability to do work, loss of attention, slower reactions, poor response, deterioration of vigilance and alertness, and impaired judgment. Think of all of these things happening to us because of fatigue, and then imagine our truck driver going down the road at 88 feet per second with a load that might be 80,000 pounds or more. 88 feet per second is 60 miles an hour, but 60 doesn't mean much. We all use those numbers. But think in terms of every second you've traveled 88 feet. If fatigue causes you to just lose focus, close your eyes just for 2 or 3 seconds, you may have traveled the length of a football field, and where are you now? Are you still on the road? Have you struck someone or something? So it's a serious, serious safety issue for us today. And then along with the physical things we've talked about, subjective feelings of tiredness, loss of motivation, a desire for rest. If that's going on, our driver isn't really focused on what he needs to be focused on, and that's keeping that truck safe and actually watching out for 4 or 5 or more amateurs that are surrounding him or her while on the road. A couple of different kinds of fatigue that we might think about. Acute fatigue is short-term. It can be relieved by getting some rest or sleep, and you're okay to go again. Chronic fatigue, and this is the one that can be more deadly. Chronic fatigue results from repeated cumulative stress and may require an extended break, such as a vacation or a holiday. And that's certainly built into most of our workplaces where at some point during the year, we can get more than just a night off. We could get more than just a weekend off because we need to deal with that repeated cumulative stress. Now, there's a place that this happens all too often in a very important part of our society in this country, and that's our military. Young men and women in the military in basic training are subjected purposely to repeated cumulative stress and fatigue. Now, they don't always get that break that will help, and especially if they're in combat. And we're seeing issues that occur now with our veterans who have come home, and they're dealing with something like PTSD, a lot of that from the repeated stress and all of the other things that go with being in combat. Well, I don't mean to compare the two, but in a very strange sense, our truck driver on the road sometime, sometime is dealing with that kind of cumulative stress because of the combat situations that may exist on the highway. This is an old press release, as you can see by the name of the trucking company, and I just put it in here because this happens so frequently. Now, this is a story about a driver that went off the road. It occurred because, and two drivers involved, but it occurred because one of the drivers fell asleep at the wheel. When he came to or woke up, he overcorrected, and now he's in the ditch, and highway's blocked. There were no injuries. This was a fortunate type of fatigue-related crash, but these can happen to us anytime, any day, any place, by any company. The best drivers are still subject to fatigue issues at times if they're not getting proper rest. So what are some causes? Inadequate rest, obviously. Sleep loss or disrupted sleep, and we're going to talk about disrupted sleep. Displaced biological rhythms, excessive physical activity, and excessive mental or cognitive work. It's pretty easy to think of somebody being really dead tired because of the physical work, loading and unloading a trailer all day, touching every piece of freight. You can really be worn out by the end of the day, but you can be just as tired from the mental strain that comes with the work you're doing. And this may involve, heavy math or something like that, or computer work. It may involve some mental and cognitive work that the drivers have to do in planning trips and routes and deliveries. So these things can cause fatigue. Primarily, we're looking at inadequate or disrupted rest and sleep. These are terms you may have heard, two different types or stages of sleep. And one is called NREM, non-rapid eye movement. We've got slow mental physical activity going on while we're trying to sleep. You may toss and turn. You're not dreaming. It's not deep sleep. REM level is rapid eye movement, active mental activity going on. Believe it or not, this is when you're resting the best. Your eyes can be seen moving behind the eyelids. You're dreaming. You can get into deep dreaming. You can actually experience and should experience what's called skeletal paralysis. Now, that's a good thing. That would keep you from sleepwalking because you're in such a deep sleep and you're dreaming, you could physically decide to get up and move. So the skeletal paralysis is a good part of sleeping in the REM cycle. We cycle through REM and non-REM about every 90 minutes, about 5 times per sleep shift if we're getting the recommended hours we're supposed to have, and we'll take a look at that later. If REM is interrupted, we do not get the recuperative sleep that we need, and this is important to keep in mind. We're going to talk about it quite a bit. If we interrupt REM when we needed to get there every 90 minutes, we may have our eyes closed all night, but we have not rested the way we needed to rest because that deep recuperative sleep was interrupted. So how much is enough? Sleep requirements vary with age. Most adults perform best with 7 to 8 hours of interrupted sleep. And I'm wondering if each of you might stop and think for a minute, how much do I usually get uninterrupted? 8 one-hour naps are not the equivalent of full 8 hours of sleep. And obviously, if you're getting naps over and over, you're never reaching REM level sleep. So the requirements vary with age. And here are some studies by the supposed experts. I don't know that much about how all of this was done, but if you've been a parent, a mom or a dad, you know that a newborn's going to sleep a lot. 2/3 of the day is going to be spent sleeping. 6 months are still sleeping away a big part of the day, but they stay awake at night to keep you company. 2 years old, still getting 12 hours or needing 12 hours. 6 years old, now we're down to 11. As we get older, the need for sleep lessens. So 15 to 19 years, our teenagers, 8.25 hours of sleep. There's a big deal going on, I think it's nationwide rather than just in Oregon, trying to figure out, because teenagers don't sleep in, or don't wake up early, they sleep in or they want to sleep in. There's some thought that maybe school days should start later in the morning and allow the teens to get the sleep they need when they need it, which is usually later in the morning. 20 to 29 years old, 7.5 hours, 30 to 49, and so on, up to the older folks. Now, I have to tell you, I'm up in this column, and I sleep about 5 or 6 hours a night. Now, on paper, that should not be enough. I feel fortunate that I have plenty of energy. I've been at this business a lot longer than Luke alluded to. He was very polite, but I've been in the industry somehow for almost 60 years. So I don't sleep very much, but I have a lot of energy. But I know that at some point during the day or during the evening, it wouldn't hurt me to have a nap, just a little power nap, 20 or 30 minutes. And we'll talk about napping later and the benefits. 80 plus years, 6 hours of sleep should still be the standard. So figure out where you are in there and think about it. Are you getting the kind of sleep that's recommended for you? The amount. Rest and sleep aren't the same. When we talk about rest, we're talking about a break or even a simple change of activity from a fatiguing task. We remain awake. Now, something came up very recently where there's a good example of a rest break being where you're not actually not moving, but you're doing something different. As you all know, there's a requirement in the federal hours of service rules that you have to take a 30-minute off-duty rest break before the 8th hour after going on duty if you intend to drive after the 8th hour. So we've got this requirement to take a 30-minute rest break off duty, which means no activity. That rule possibly will be changing. There's a proposed rule now, and you may have heard about it. I'd encourage you not to try doing any of those things because the rule hasn't been approved. But one of the recommendations is that the driver could take his or her 30-minute rest break while they're doing something else like fueling. So in a way, if you look at our bullet point, their rest is a break or an even simple change of activity from a fatiguing task. Driving is fatiguing. So the DOT is saying they're comfortable with that driver being able to take a rest break by simply getting out of the truck and doing something else. A rest can restore energy, but it cannot substitute for sleep. That's the big difference. Rest can restore some energy, but is not a replacement for sleep. Nor can lack of sleep be corrected simply by resting. Sleep, and this is so important, allows both the body and the brain to recuperate. A term you may not have heard, circadian rhythms. We talk about our biological clock, and you may have heard the term circadian cycles or rhythms. Our brain's internal clock coordinates daily cycles, and the term is circadian. Sleeping, waking, body temperature, hormonal secretion, digestion, performance. There's an internal clock that coordinates these cycles, and it goes on all the time we're alive, 24 hours a day. The circadian clock is reset daily by bright light, work and rest schedules, social interaction. Now keep in mind it resets daily. Now, we cannot adapt quickly to such changes as sleep and work schedule changes because of this. We can't easily affect our circadian rhythm or our biological clock. We can work at changing it, but basically this is a natural thing that will happen, and it's usually reset by bright light or a work schedule or some social interaction, but it cannot adapt quickly. So there are lulls, the circadian low points. A circadian low point or a lull will occur in mid-afternoon, and then there will be another one at a point after midnight. And what has happened is our body temperature has dropped. And our body is saying, I'd really like to rest right now. It'll happen in the afternoon, and it will happen sometime after midnight. These are very general times. Please don't hold me to them. Now, the afternoon lull, think about this. There are societies, there are cultures around our world where this is dealt with very efficiently because they take a siesta, an afternoon rest. And that's a time that the body's really saying, I wouldn't mind resting for a while, and then they'll go back to work. But we don't really have anything in our schedule for that midnight lull other than a lot of people, most people probably sleep at midnight. They're sleeping. There's a decrease in response rates and mental performance. Remember, our body is slowing down. It's trying to slow down physically and mentally. A decline in mood and motivation. So that's a time that your mood could actually change, and you certainly may not be motivated to do any activity. It's a time for rest, and it's natural. Increased sleepiness and fatigue will occur. Working during a circadian lull can affect performance even if we're not fatigued. So assume we've started the day and we're feeling strong, well rested, and everything is good. The traffic isn't too bad, the truck's running great, and we're headed down the road, but we've got a long day. We're going to drive 11 hours today. Somewhere in the afternoon, our body is saying, can't you take a break? Because it doesn't want to keep driving. And no matter what you tell your body to do, no matter the fact that you keep your foot on the pedal, your body is trying to slow down mentally and physically. And that means that you're going to experience increased sleepiness and fatigue during that time. If you understand that, if the driver understands that, then it can certainly be dealt with. It's dealt with by taking a nap. Take a break and take a nap, take a rest. And in most cases, I know we got a lot of problems with our highway system, but in most cases, and I've traveled in all the states, there are usually rest areas, and it's a matter for the driver of planning, knowing ahead of time where there will be a rest area, where there's a truck stop, where they can safely pull off and actually take a nap. And we'll talk some more about naps. But keep in mind, 88 feet per second going down the road on a nice, warm, sunny afternoon, and this driver is struggling to stay awake, and he doesn't know why, doesn't understand it. So I'm a real believer in communication with our drivers. You can do it in a driver safety meeting. You can do it in a safety bulletin, a letter, video, online material, but they need to understand this circadian cycle that occurs with them, and they're not immune. Nobody gets away from it. This happens with all of us. Here's some factors that will affect the lull, the rhythm. Flying across time zones. We hear the term jet lag, and it actually occurs depending on how many time zones you've crossed. But jet lag is a factor in keeping us from being at the top of our game, keeping us from being as alert and sharp as we should be. Over the years, I've had to do a lot of work. Living in Portland, Oregon, I've had to do a lot of work on the East Coast. So I lose 3 hours when I go east. I made a habit of waking up 3 hours early on those days. So if my typical wake-up time is 5 a.m., I'd get up at 2. It wasn't fun. It was a bit of a struggle. But by the time I got to the East Coast and got to the evening on their time, I was really tired. In one day, one flight, I could adapt to the time zone change. It unfortunately doesn't work coming back. But it was just a trick that I tried, and it seemed to help. Shift changes will change, and we'll talk about that again too. A shift change suddenly puts your body into a different time, and it's still trying to stay on that same cycle. Drug use, especially prohibited drug use, will certainly affect the circadian rhythm because it's affecting almost all of the systems in your body and changing them. Bright lights will affect it. And quite often, we'll talk something about seasonal affective disorder later, and bright lights are the therapy that is used. Sleep loss will increase the effect of a circadian low. If you maybe got to, make up numbers here, to a level 1 or 2 without sleep loss, and now you're dealing with sleep loss, you may be at a 3 or 4. The low is that much lower and harder for you to deal with if you're trying to remain active. And remember, quite often our drivers don't understand what's happening to them, but it may be 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. And one of the things we don't want to do is eat a big heavy meal during a circadian lull. That's just going to make it more difficult to stay awake. 1 in the morning, if you stop at a truck stop, have a light salad or a bowl of soup or something, but not a great big old honking cheeseburger and fries. They taste so good, but that's not when you want to be piling on that kind of food. Night work, this is where it's a real problem. Daytime people who work at night have to reset the clock. People who work nights during the week will tend to revert to daytime schedules on weekends. They have families, they have activities, and the activities aren't done during the night. So you work nights for 5 nights, and then Saturday morning you're wide awake and you're going to a ball game and you're going to be out there in the daylight most of the day. If you can stay with that new shift for a while, you could adapt. Your body will adapt. But to completely adapt to a new schedule could take 2 or 3 weeks. Periodic changes in a shift schedule will disrupt the rhythm again. So if you're on a night shift, stay with it as long as you can. If you're setting the shifts, try and keep your employees on that same shift. Pardon me. Okay, sleep and trucking operations, and that's pretty much what we're about here today. Trucking operations create a sleep problem. We have to be aware of that. We have to accept it and do our best to deal with it. Extended duty periods. We think in terms of jobs being an 8-hour day, not anymore. With the hours of service that we're allowed to operate, our driver could be behind the wheel for 11 hours in a given day, and maybe even a couple more hours if they run into things like adverse conditions. They may be actually on duty up to 14 hours, maybe even longer than that. So we've got extended duty periods. It's not just an 8-hour day. And we've got a restricted sleeping time because we may be sleeping in less than good conditions. Might be a sleeper berth that isn't real comfortable. It might be a hotel room. So we're building sleep debt when we're not getting good sleep. Conflicts between the duty schedule and the body time, the circadian rhythm, the cycle that's going on, and your trucking schedule, your departure and arrival schedule, your appointments may not coincide with that cycle of your body that's saying, hey, I need rest. And frequent disruption, frequent circadian disruption, schedules change. Some of you might be used to a 7 a.m. dispatch every day of the week, but suddenly on Thursday it changes and you have to leave 2 hours earlier, or you don't leave till 2 hours later. That is a disruption, and your body all week long has been trying to keep you in that cycle you seem to be trying to maintain. So if you change it, then your body's trying to make another immediate adjustment, and the adjustments are never immediate. Some sleep disorders that we'll talk about: insomnia, apnea, periodic leg movement, restless leg syndrome, narcolepsy. We'll talk about these as we go, but these will all affect a driver's ability to get good sleep. Insomnia. It's sleeplessness that's unrelated to any other cause. There's no reason for it. It's not noise, it's not room temperature, it's not illness. There's no other cause. It's simply not the ability to sleep. You can't do it. It's not a disease, it's a symptom of other underlying causes. And here are the things that may cause insomnia. Stress. And we don't need to say it anymore, but I hope you all agree, when we send your driver out with a combination or a vehicle that could weigh anywhere from 20 tons to 50 tons out there, they're on the road and they've got a big, large, sometimes slow machine that they're trying to coax down the road and not get involved with any other motorists. And the motorists, as I mentioned before, that are surrounding us are mostly amateurs. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand your needs for time and space. the stress of dealing with all of that can be a factor. Depression, truly clinical diagnosed depression, will keep you from focusing on the job. You're stressing during the day, which isn't safe, but then you get home or you get off the truck for the evening, afternoon, and now you're still in a state of depression, worrying about whatever it might be, a family issue, finances, health. Something is working on you. Epilepsy is a diagnosed disease, and it can certainly be a symptom or a cause of insomnia, and so is diabetes. And diabetes is something we can deal with. We can deal with it with exercise, with diet, if we get to it soon enough. And it's something that we need to watch all the time with our drivers. And the DOT is concerned enough that we're tested for it. Ulcers, indigestion, that's an uncomfortable situation, and that discomfort will cause you to not sleep. That's insomnia. Pain of angina or angina, I'm not sure how they pronounce that word, but it's heart pain, and it can come from a restriction in one of the vessels. It can be dealt with, pardon me, sometimes through surgery, like an angioplasty, and they can put a stent in, and it removes the blockage that was causing the pain. But while you're suffering with it, and quite often people suffer with it for weeks or months, it is contributing to insomnia. Apnea, and this is probably the one that is most frequently discussed in today's times in our industry. Now, it's caused by accumulations of fat around the respiratory tract at the back of the throat. As the muscle tone relaxes during sleep, surplus fat will fall back and choke the airway. When that happens, if you're suffering from apnea, and the full name is obstructive sleep apnea, OSA, but apnea is what we call it. So when it happens, you stop breathing for periods as long as a minute. Snoring will occur. It's unusual for an apnea sufferer not to snore. Your lungs struggle for air. It wakes you up. Now, you woke up usually from REM level sleep. So the REM level where you needed to get your recuperative rest has now been interrupted. And now you're trying to go back to sleep, and you don't even know this happened. This happens sometimes without you waking up completely. But you have left REM level, so your sleep has been interrupted. So we've got all of these things here that are having to do with your airway, and when you stop breathing, then you're going to start again. Your body won't let you just lay there not breathing, and you're going to start breathing with a start. And as we mentioned, quite often, snoring, very loud snoring, will occur. And don't ever repeat this if you ever see me on the street with my wife, but she suffers with apnea, and she isn't part of the high-risk group, but she certainly has it. She's had it for several years, and if she isn't wearing the CPAP that she uses, her snoring will raise the rafters in the house, and she's a very tiny woman. Apnea can occur with anyone in any situation, but typically it's going to be somebody who's, and typically male. Most apnea sufferers are male. So a middle-aged male, slightly overweight, is the ideal risk type. Middle-aged, slightly overweight. When the DOT medical examiner is looking at a driver for a medical exam, they will typically use a standard of 25 body mass index. If the BMI is over 25, that's a symptom and could lead the driver to being sent to a sleep study. Middle-aged, slightly overweight, a large neck size, and typically the medical examiner will use 17 as the standard. A size 17 neck or larger is a possible subject for a sleep study. A protruding jawline, a deviated septum. These are things that will affect the airway. So if they're affecting the airway, they could be creating or causing the apnea presence. So when we look at this, and then think about our truck driving population, I think you'll agree we have a lot of people running around out there in that middle-aged male group, slightly overweight, some extremely overweight, which just exacerbates the issue with apnea. Now, all you need to know about my family, I'll quit talking about him. My son's a truck driver. He's used a CPAP because he is a big guy, and he was diagnosed with apnea, and he's used it for about 10 years. He will not travel anywhere without the CPAP. When we hunt out in the woods, he has a generator, so the CPAP will run at night. And he's extremely dependent on it because it gives him the rest he needs, because he runs a long route every day and he needs to be rested, and this works. So we get concerned about someone sending people for a sleep study when it wasn't necessary, but we need to keep in mind that apnea could be a deadly cause of a problem here. Apnea could cause this driver to not be able to stay awake and go off the highway. Several years ago, the DOT published a study of how many truck drivers had died in vehicle crashes, and they estimated close to 500 drivers died in 1 year in this country in a single vehicle off the road crash. Nobody knows because there were not necessarily good witnesses. Only one person knows, and he's deceased. A single vehicle off the road crash, nothing else involved. We have to believe that fatigue is a part of that. So apnea is something that will cause fatigue. It's the enemy to safety, and we have to be aware and deal with it. Periodic leg movement, PLM, and restless leg syndrome are things that occur. PLM is when your legs repeatedly jerk, kick, or twitch while you're sleeping. You may not even be aware of it. Your partner, whoever's in bed next to you, may be aware of it and at least tell you about it. If that's happening, you need to see someone because it interrupts your rapid eye movement. It interrupts REM sleep. Restless leg syndrome occurs when the subject is awake, the legs develop crawling, itching sensations, aching, cramping, and the subject wakes up and has to walk to relieve the discomfort. Of course, if you have to wake up in the middle of the night to walk around because your legs hurt, you've now also interrupted one of the REM level cycles. When this person who suffers PLM or RLS, when they wake up in the morning, they think they've had a night's sleep. They have not had a night of good, interrupted, recuperative sleep. And it's because of these types of sleep disorders. Narcolepsy is really dangerous because you're usually not even aware that you're struggling with it for a while. It's an irresistible urge to fall asleep several times a day. It could happen when you're sitting in a computer and suddenly you're sound asleep and your fingers are still on the keyboard. It could happen when you're walking and you fall. You could experience the skeletal paralysis that we talked about earlier in REM level, and hallucinations can occur. Well, this could happen. It's rare, but it could happen while the driver's at the wheel. So if there's any hint of this type of occurrence with a driver, with anyone, they need to be tested. They need to be checked right away because this could easily be a fatal situation. Even at home, even in the house, a fall could be devastating. What not to do? Do not rely on drugs, sleeping pills to get to sleep. They're unsafe. They will interfere with REM level. They'll put you to sleep and you think you're getting good rest, but you're not. Your body is not relaxing with the drugs that are offered for sleeping. Don't rely on alcohol for sleep. Alcohol is great. If you don't have a problem with addiction to alcohol, it's great. It tastes good, you enjoy it, you have some socially, and that's it. But don't rely on getting better sleep with alcohol because alcohol will affect and disrupt REM level sleep. People go to sleep quickly if they've had enough alcohol. That's called passing out. That's not going to sleep. And in the morning, they don't feel too hot sometimes when they wake up, but that's also called coming to. They haven't really slept because of the alcohol. Nicotine use can be a problem. Nicotine use will also interfere with sleep. Excessive caffeine, obviously, will interfere with sleep. Because of the drug itself can kind of get you wired, but it's also a diuretic, and so you may just wake up because you have to use the bathroom during the night. And just remember, when you get up, when you wake up, you've interrupted a REM level cycle, probably. One of the things that are really easily dealt with if we will just do something, and that's a sedentary lifestyle. No exercise, no mental activity. Driving the truck 11 hours is pretty sedentary physically. Mentally, it's not sedentary at all, but it's physically sedentary. A long-distance driver should have some means of stretching, walking, jogging, doing something during off-duty break times. I knew a truck driver who started gaining weight when he went to work for a long-haul, over-the-road nationwide trucking company. And in a couple of weeks, he'd gained 8 or 9 pounds. He decided he had to change his diet. So instead of eating in the truck stops, in the buffet line, he started very carefully planning lunches and dinners. And he bought a bicycle. And he had the bicycle strapped to the back of the cab. And when he took a layover, he'd go for a bike ride. And he got to where he really looked forward to that. And after another month or two, he had lost that excessive weight. An improper diet is going to be a factor. It's so easy for us, especially because it tastes so good, to eat the things that are high in fat, high in carbs, not necessarily the best food for us. So one of the things we have to do to deal with insomnia and to deal with overweight is to simply have some sort of a plan for exercise and for proper nutrition. Okay, a little bit about sleep aid effects. Sleeping pills can actually delay the onset of sleep, and it can disrupt sleep quality. I mentioned it before. Do not trust sleeping pills to get you to a REM level. They won't do it. They will cause you to go to sleep quickly, but they also build a dependency, and they do that very quickly also. And then you find yourself at some point where you cannot go to sleep without the pills, and then gradually you cannot go to sleep with the dosage that was recommended. So you start adding dosage. Librium, Valium, Halcion, diazepam. These the benzodiazepines, are commonly used for sleep aids. They also can build a dependence. And if you're trying to take them for whatever reason during the day as a stress reliever or something, they're really dangerous because they're going to cause you to get sleepy, even though they won't help you to get good sleep. The state of Washington actually regulates some of these as a prohibited substance. It's not a DOT situation. It's the state of Washington, the state patrol can actually cite for someone being under the influence, and it's actually the effect of these benzodiazepines. We may adapt to sleeping pills, may experience withdrawal symptoms too. And the withdrawal sometimes can be one of the worst experiences of our life. If you've been through any kind of an addiction or dealt with someone who has dealt with alcohol or drugs or gambling or some type of dependency, the withdrawal process is extremely painful and may be extremely expensive. Alcohol. Mentioned it earlier, some people use alcohol as a sleep aid. It suppresses REM, leads to disrupted sleep. I knew a dear sweet lady in her 80s who thought that, I think it's called Nitol, about 28% alcohol. She thought that was the nectar of the gods because it helped her to sleep so well. Well, this dear lady actually just passed out every night after having a pretty good slug of that stuff. And then when she came to in the morning, she'd spend the rest of the day napping, not understanding that she could have had a better night's sleep and wouldn't be as sleepy during the day. Alcohol can interact with sleep loss, and it causes drowsiness, and once again, that's deadly for our truck driver. 88 feet per second, going down the highway with all the stuff going on around them, they have to be at the top of their game. I would put a professional truck driver's alertness and skill and attentiveness right up there with a jet pilot. They cannot lose focus for a second or two. Alcohol is not generally an effective sleep aid. Please accept that and share it with the drivers, other employees. There are other things we can do, as we'll see, but relying on alcohol to sleep isn't one. Enjoy the alcohol, enjoy the beer, the glass of wine, or a mixed drink, but that is not how you try and go to sleep. Nicotine's a stimulant. It'll raise your heartbeat and blood pressure. A lot of folks who are smokers, really heavy smokers, will have a cigarette the last thing before they go to bed. They may stub out the butt of the cigarette in an ashtray on their nightstand. That's their last breath before they lay down. And now they've got the stimulant in their system and they're trying to go to sleep. It'll cause frequent awakenings during the sleep period. Heavy smokers awake to smoke during the sleep period, and we've seen that happen. They'll wake up only because they needed to have another cigarette. So they sit there on the edge of the bed, have a cigarette, put it out, and now they've incorporated the stimulant again, and now they're trying to go back to sleep. Vicious cycle. So nicotine, of course, if there's any way to be free of the nicotine and stop using tobacco, that would be the best solution. But don't rely on just being able to relax with one more cigarette and then try and go to sleep, because it just doesn't work well. All right, now we're into my addiction here, caffeine. And it's found in coffee, chocolate, and soft drinks. All three are just wonderful, aren't they? It's a stimulant. Caffeine's a stimulant, stimulates adrenal gland, may delay onset of sleep. People sometimes go to decaf because the caffeine itself is keeping them awake. It's a diuretic. It can cause you to awaken during sleep just to urinate. It can increase the severity of the two types we talked about earlier, PLM and RLS. It can increase the severity. Coffee is my drug of choice, and I drink it early in the morning and drink it all day long. I don't know if my body is just tough or whether I'm not very bright, but I live on coffee all day. I still eat, but I drink a lot of coffee and I sleep like a baby, and I don't understand why. It shouldn't work that way, but I suspect I built some immunity. My wife has to be on decaf from noon on. So figure that out. You know, is coffee affecting your sleep effort? Are your drivers having a little issue with it? Can you provide decaf in the driver's room if somebody may want to try the decaf? I don't think decaf's that great myself. It's like kissing your sister. I just would rather drink good, strong coffee. But anyway, I understand the problem with it. I just somehow, so far, seem to be immune to it. A sedentary lifestyle, and this is really a problem in our industry. Sedentary subjects experience less slow-wave REM sleep, poorer circulation. One of the reasons we can sleep so well is because we have good blood flow going through our system. When weight gain occurs, lack of exercise promotes sleep interruptions because of the weight we've gained. And remember, this weight gain isn't just going to be on your legs or arms or your belly. It's also going to be in the fatty tissue that leads into your airway. And so the weight gain is also putting you at a greater risk for obstructive sleep apnea. So the sedentary lifestyle is a serious problem. And it's built in quite often for what our drivers are doing. If you got somebody on a route, a beverage delivery, for example, you're out there delivering Pepsi or Coke, your drivers are probably doing great because they're in and out of the truck frequently and they're doing some pretty heavy physical work. But we have a lot of drivers who don't leave the truck except for a mandatory break or to fuel up, and then they keep going. Improper diet, high in fat content, simple carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates that have been refined. Those are simple. White flour, white rice, sugar. And we love that stuff. Those are some of our favorite meals. Man, if you can combine white flour, white rice, and sugar, you got a heck of a gourmet delight. And you're not doing any good at all for your body. So diet is a big issue going through all of the issues we've talked about with sleep problems. So what can we do? Some suggestions. And please keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. I don't have any kind of credentials. All of the material we're sharing with you is available to everybody. My whole background is trucking. It's all I've ever done. But I've been around it long enough and dealt with enough people and done it myself to know that these things can certainly apply in our industry. So what can we do? With diet, reduce fats, reduce simple carbohydrates, increase consumption of complex carbohydrates, which means you have to know the difference. No heavy meals prior to sleep. And of course, if you go back years and years and years, we ate our large meals in the morning and at noon, and then a lighter meal in the evening. We needed a lot of energy. We were going out to work the fields or do whatever. So we ate big in the morning and lesser in the evening. But today it's kind of flipped. Some people don't even eat breakfast, but they sure make up for it at lunch and dinner. Reduce fats, reduce the simple carbohydrates, increase consumption of complex. No heavy meals prior to sleep. Those are pretty simple rules, and it's not the end of the world if we have to try and get to a diet like that. And today's truck stops, if you're eating in truck stops, they do have a lot more options than they did years and years and years ago. So you can still eat properly, eat wisely in a truck stop. You don't have to go for the full buffet all the time. Exercise. Experts recommend at least 3 times a week to get aerobic exercise, and you should get at least half an hour. An aerobic exercise gets your heart rate up at a pretty good level, 120, 130, maybe 140 beats a minute. And this depends on your age, and there are formulas where you can figure out where your threshold heart rate should be. But your heart is just this unbelievable, great muscle that's working in there for you, and you need to help keep it healthy. And the way you keep it healthy is to feed it right and make it work, make it stay active. Walking as often as possible. Walking is great exercise. It's inexpensive. It can be done almost any place. We need to take some safety issues if we're walking in low light, at daylight or dawn or something. We need to be easily seen because we quite often have to walk where there's traffic. But just a mile or two of walking every day, it's not a lot, but it would certainly help. It'd be a start. Light exercise, just stretching or something like that, 1 or 2 hours prior to sleep. Some folks, and I've been guilty of it, will go to a health club. They pass all the machines and all the weights, and they go to the sauna or the steam room. And I love that. But I've found I can do exercises in there while I'm in there and do something that I'm still burning some calories, still hopefully keeping these old muscles a little bit ready to do some work. Now, this may sound silly to you, but if you're especially subject or prone to apnea risk, neck, throat, tongue stretches and exercises, they increase the airway passage. And you can go online and find all kinds of exercises like that would help. And last, exercise your mind. Reading, crossword puzzles, board games, anything that makes you think, makes your mind work. And you can do that while you're driving, and it's some of these things you can do while you're driving. Don't work the crossword puzzle, don't read. But if you're doing something that's making you think and maybe playing a game in your mind, that's exercise for your mind, and it's keeping it healthy too. And I can't guarantee this. I've read a lot about it. And good exercise, the reading, the puzzles, the board games, debate, those kinds of things may also minimize the onset of some sort of dementia. So there could be another benefit there if you make the brain work. Napping, we've touched on it a couple of times. A short nap, less than 45 minutes, can improve alertness. A longer nap carries the risk of sleep inertia. I've talked to people who've never heard that term before. Sleep inertia can affect your performance if you drive too soon after awakening, so plan ahead. A short nap, you can wake up from that and you're pretty fresh and ready to go. A long nap, if you slept an hour or so or more, you're suffering sleep inertia. You won't realize it totally. Just take a minute, get out, walk around, maybe use a restroom, depending on where you are, but don't just start the truck and leave. Take a minute to really wake up completely before you drive. If you're driving, plan to nap at a safe rest stop during long hauls. Be sure you're over the sleep inertia, though, before you resume your drive. And I have to apologize, I misspelled inertia there. It looks like inertia. That's a special word. and you'll only see it here. So napping can be a lifesaver. They use the term power naps. I'm not even sure what that is. That might be a short nap, less than 45 minutes. But you've probably all done that at some point, 15, 20-minute nap, 30 minutes, and you're fresh, and you can go again. And there are plenty of places to pull over, stop driving, take a little nap. Sleep habits, good sleep habits. Minimize disruptive factors. Don't have any unnecessary noise going on. Some people do use some, what they call white noise, something really soft that might help. But outside noises, external factors, phones ringing, lights on that you don't need. Try and have a good environment in which to fall asleep. Sleep in a dark, quiet room. Keep a comfortable room temperature, and that might be cooler than you think it should be. Use a comfortable sleeping surface and good sleep posture. Make sure the pillow is at the right angle to where you're not creating a problem just by the bend in your neck trying to match the pillow. And avoid a pile of blankets or quilts. Consider an electric blanket, something much lighter, but it'll provide heat if you need it. A lot of blankets piled on top of you, it feels kind of cozy at first, but you'll toss and turn under them. They will not be comfortable during the night when you're trying to reach that deep, deep sleep. Develop a habit of bed equals sleep. Bed does not equal television, video games, watching movies. Bed is for sleep. Get into a routine that says it's time to sleep, and you can do some light reading, a light snack, no heavy food, and some soft music that kind of prepares you to get to sleep. And whenever you can do it, awake and sleep at the same time every day. Remember, your body, this amazing machine, is trying to adjust every day to keep you in the same cycle. If you can awake and sleep at pretty much the same time, that's going to help tremendously. We see abuses of this all the time, and it's because we work hard. We get up early, go to work Monday through Friday, and what do Saturday? We sleep in. We sleep 2 or 3 hours extra sometime at an extreme. So we're up at a certain time, to sleep at a certain time for 5 days, and then for 2 days, we mess up the schedule. Now we've got to get back to the up at 5 or whatever, up early, go to work. So if you can do it, awake and to sleep at the same time every day, it's not all bad. If you can get yourself adapted to it, it's what I do. I have a lot of time, valuable time, early in the morning, and nobody in my family would sleep in like that, but I'm wide awake. I have time to do some things that might be important. It might be some work, some paperwork. It might just be reading the paper, watching something on television, or going for a walk. I have that extra time because I didn't sleep in for the weekend. So try and adapt to it. It will, experience has shown that it will allow better sleep. Your wake-up routine, let the light in, turn it on, blink your eyes rapidly, stretch a little. This is my idea. My wife doesn't agree with this very much. I play march music in the morning because I love to listen to it. John Philip Sousa isn't for everybody, but you can put on some music. You can do something that begins activity and begins your body saying it's time to get going. Some strategies for night and shift workers. If possible, do your most difficult jobs at the beginning of the shift. Try to stay with the same shift for at least 3 weeks. Remember, your body is trying to adjust that circadian system. When you're changing shifts, try to change to later than earlier. It works easier. Take frequent rest breaks. Try to get out to sunlight and work under bright lights indoors. Eat your heaviest meal early, lighter at mid-shift, and lightest before sleep. Try to wake at the same time. We're repeating ourselves here, but this is really important. Encourage your family to cooperate. Don't let your son play the drums when you're trying to go to sleep. Go outdoors and exercise whenever you can, particularly in sunlight. Avoid active exercise just before sleep. reduce or eliminate nicotine. I'm moving right along because I think you know most of these. Reduce caffeine or use decaf. Consider herbal teas. And there's some weird herbal teas. I don't drink tea, but I'm told that that is really good stuff. Melatonin, it's a natural hormone that your pineal gland secretes during darkness. It promotes sleep. Some of us don't get enough melatonin. It helps to synchronize your circadian lull. And it can quicken getting over jet lag or shift lag. So melatonin, it's non-prescription. Just be careful. Ask somebody about it. Read up on it so you know what you're doing with it and know what you're taking. Sometimes the tablets that are available will have too high a dose. More research is still needed. Medical research is needed on the possible long-term effects of use. I haven't seen any of that research being available yet. When driving, engage in conversation. Listen to talk radio. Talk to passengers. Stay active. Stretch your muscles. Stop for frequent rest. Open the side windows for fresh air. Don't smoke. Nicotine is not an effective stimulant in the cab. The smoke will make us drowsy. And then closing up here, the seasonal affective disorder is a diagnosed illness from lack of light. It happens more in the northern hemisphere, way up north, and it causes depression, overeating, oversleeping, social withdrawal, lack of energy. Here's our safety issue, a lack of concentration. And remember, 88 feet per second going down the highway. And there are treatments, phototherapy, a formal light treatment, medication, diet. Follow the sun. Spend more time outdoors. In Oregon here, during the winter, we get some pretty gray days. And I found years ago, I could learn how to snowshoe because I'm pretty clumsy and I can do that. And I can go up on Mount Hood and get all the sunshine I want for a day. And I believe it actually can help. So that's it. We've covered a lot of ground here, and I'll turn it back over to Luke.
Yeah, thank you, John. I know it's right at the top of the hour, so if you do have any questions, I'll send this out, and you can email me, and we can answer any questions you have via email after this. I do just also want to wrap up regulatory-wise, sleep apnea regulation bill for the trucking industry still on the back burner. It's not technically dead. Now that we're getting past, hours of service potentially getting past, a clearinghouse, getting past, starting next year, a lot of these bigger items are finally already going to be in place, hopefully by the end of next year. And so the question is, what's coming next? Something like sleep apnea might try to be tackled again. It could be, politics comes along with this as well. So just something to remember that that is something that's on the back burner, and it's still a safety issue that they're going to be looking into. Other than that, thank you, John, for diving into this. This is great information for drivers and for fleet managers to just understand what these drivers are going through and how to approach that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just wrap up this webinar. Expect an email out hopefully the end of the day today with the link of this recording, the presentation, and if you have any questions, we can email back and forth and get some answers that way. Again, thank you, John, and that concludes our presentation.